What's up, guys? So in today's video, I am going to share with you the 6 things that I wish I knew when I first started oil painting. Number 1 is contrast. So when you're painting realism, you're going to want to use a lot of contrast. So try to use the dark colors along with the bright, lighter colors in pretty close proximity to each other, because that way it brings out the details even further. Because when you paint something, you're going to have this tendency, this habit towards keeping the shades kind of like closer to each other, kind of more unified. But don't be afraid to have more of the extremes, because in real life you're going to have, especially with sunny weather, you're going to have the more extreme types of shades in darker colors along with the lighter colors. So keep the contrast and just find ways to blend them together as well as possible. Number 2 is the color. Try to keep the color hues and intensities, for the most part, keep them at a lower level, because if you have too much vivid colors, they're going to clash with each other. They're going to create too much noise in the painting. And part of the realism of the paintings that you do is that most of the colors are less intense. And that's how it is in real life. You're not going to see like the extreme types of colors that you see in the painting tubes that come out. So save the vivid colors, all those vivid, intense hues. Save those for the more refined details when you're getting closer to finishing the painting. But for the most part, keep the colors at a lower intensity, especially with the backgrounds, because the backgrounds are going to be more gray, more bluish anyways. So keep the colors more on the less intense part of the spectrum, and don't be afraid to use a lot of gray. You can mix the grays a lot with the colors and keep that color spectrum on the more conservative side. So keep that in mind when you're mixing the paints on there. Number 3 is reference materials. So when you're painting realism, it's good to use reference materials to kind of see what you're working with. Otherwise, if you always rely on your own imagination, your imagination is going to run wild, and you can't really trust it all the time. It's going to affect your painting. It's not going to make it look as realistic. It's not going to look as good. So focus on making sure that you follow what you're trying to paint. Like if you're painting a landscape, try to get an understanding of where the sky is, where the dimensions are, the depth and all that. Because if you don't use any kind of photographs, especially when you're beginning, you're not going to be able to get an accurate depiction of what you're trying to put onto the canvas. So using photographs and using a grid, kind of like the one that I'm using on this one. I'm using an 8x8 grid for this painting, The Death of Socrates, because that way the lines that you use from the grid, it's going to push the details on there in the right position. Otherwise, it's going to come out like really sloppy. It's not going to look as professional. So keep that in mind. Number 4 is layering. When you're painting realism, use a lot of layering, and don't be afraid to go back to finish off the other details, because if you use layers, it helps create that perspective, and also the colors that are underneath the topmost layer, they do have a significant impact on what you're painting, because they have an effect on the way that the three-dimensional objects look. And if you don't use any layers, it's going to come out really flat. The colors are not going to show out as much, and it's just going to look very, just very muddy, very flat, and very unprofessional. So all these things they're going to add up. And don't be afraid to redo those areas too, because if you do get pretty far along the painting without adding layers, you're going to have this tendency towards wanting to finish it without going over it again. And sometimes it's actually best to go back to a certain part and maybe redo it or refine it, continue to refine it, and not being afraid to keep re-editing it. Number 5 is patience. So being patient in a painting is especially important. I mean, this sounds pretty obvious, but when you're getting to the last stages of the painting, when you're becoming closer to finishing it, you're going to maybe be overzealous about wanting to showcase it, to show it off to people like on social media. But keep going with the painting, keep finishing and refining those last details, because it does take the longest time to get to the last stages of the painting, because getting those details down, it's very time consuming, but it's well worth it. It's gonna really separate the good paintings from the mediocre ones. And that's especially true with the smaller parts of the painting too, because if you have a lot of small things that you do that are not done that well, they're gonna look very mediocre, and it's all the small details that come together that really count. So make sure to do a good job with all of the small parts, because they're gonna add up. They're gonna look a lot better altogether, just a lot more unified. So being patient, taking your time on the details, not doing a half-done job, it's gonna show off in the canvas. And yeah, just stick with it, and it'll be worth it in the end. Number 6 is to stay inspired. I think that the best work comes out when you're inspired. Otherwise, if you just push yourself painting and just kind of like trudge along with it, it's going to come out mediocre. It's going to come out uninspired, and people can pick up on that. I think people can sense whether a good artwork is inspired or not just by the feel of it. It sounds kind of spiritual, but I believe that the energy that you put into a painting, it's going to come out on the end result. So being inspired, being motivated, and having this drive to make a good piece of artwork, it's really important, because if you don't, it's not going to be that good. You're just going to trudge along with it and not have that much refined detail on there. So keeping yourself motivated, keeping yourself energetic, the basics, having good energy levels, being healthy, taking care of yourself, exercising, eating healthy, all those things are going to add up to your level of inspiration, motivation, and your overall energy behind the output that you put into the painting. So yeah, these are the 6 things that I wish I knew when I first started painting. I learned them over the years, and I hope that they helped you guys out. I know they did for me. So if you guys like this video, leave a comment below. Give me some good feedback on there. Any kind of feedback is appreciated, because this is a pretty new YouTube channel. So let me know what kind of things you want me to do in the future, any future videos. And click that like button, subscribe to my channel. Thanks.